Welcome back to our series on the nexus of cryptocurrency and national security. In our previous two episodes, we dived into how cryptocurrency is reshaping national security and explored its complexity and examined how real-world examples of crypto crime are unfolding in places like North Korea and Russia. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and today Joan Heald, Vice President of IC/DoD Software Solutions at Chainalysis, and Colonel Dave Hamilton, U.S. Army retired and a threat finance exploitation consultant, are joining us to close out the series and unmask crypto crime in Iran and China. Dave and Joan, thank you again for joining us. And Joan, let me start with the question of what are some notable trends that you're seeing in the way of crypto crime in Iran and China? And how does this intelligence highlight the challenges and also the risks associated with cryptocurrencies in these countries?
Hi, Wyatt. Thanks for having us again. So Iran and China are big players in Bitcoin mining. And with the subsidized electricity rates in Iran, we're really seeing a large-scale operation. And they're doing this through malware and on compromised systems to do it covertly. We both China and Iran are cut off from the global financial system. So we see a lot of sanction invasion being a big trend with them now. And then Iran in particular, they're using cryptocurrency to bypass the standard financial systems and go right into the global financial systems despite sanctions.
And then, Dave, how have you seen Iran's large-scale Bitcoin mining activities in particular? How's that affected the country's economy and the global cryptocurrency market in general? And lastly, what are the potential implications of what's going on in Iran?
Well, Joan is spot on. Tehran has obviously realized that cryptocurrency contribution to the nation's so-called resistance economy outweighs the risk. The crypto mining has resulted in job growth in the mining and energy sector, as well as providing an injection of mining-derived revenue. And Iran, oddly enough, is one of the few nations to implement a comprehensive policy for the use of crypto in international trade, which enhances the value of its mining output. Now, of concern here, though, should the BRICS nation adopt Bitcoin as an alternative to the US dollar, which they're actively discussing, Iran and other actors may benefit from increased trade free of sanctions constraint. A stable source of income is also a possibility, and the potential for a more resilient income and economy is a concern. The stable crypto environment possible in this scenario might actually contribute to increased crypto price stabilizations, and that enables further adoption in a reinforcement loop, if you will. And that creates a challenging compliance condition for Western institutions that may lack the backing of USD strength.
And then, Joan, I'm curious, what do you see as the potential implications of these activities and how that'll affect the kind of larger picture?
Yeah, so I'd say that we not only see nation states using crypto mining for money laundering, we're also now seeing just your traditional cyber criminals doing the same. And a lot of this is solvable, in our opinion, that if these mining pools and these hashing services would use tools like Chainalysis, they would be able to determine the origins of these funds and then reject funds that are from illicit addresses.
And Dave, back to you. I'm curious, what is the relationship between crypto and fentanyl trafficking in China? I know that's become a big issue. Could you explain the extent of this issue and maybe elaborate on any notable law enforcement actions that have been taken to tackle it?
Well, fentanyl obviously a huge concern in the United States and growing throughout the globe. And China is the leading producer of fentanyl producers, feeding that US market. And despite CCP intervention recently, Chinese organized crime is still the #1 supplier of those chemicals. A crypto nexus exists, according to a Chainalysis blog that reported nearly 38 million in crypto transactions linked to addresses suspected to be associated with fentanyl production. And as in most drug cases, following the money is a very useful tactic and may have contributed to some of these enforcement actions. This April, OFAC sanctioned 2 Chinese organizations and 4 individuals for supplying precursors to the United States market. And just a few weeks ago, the Department of Justice charged 4 PRC companies and 8 executives, mind you, for the production of the equivalent of 75 million lethal doses of fentanyl that came into the United States. So that is concerning, but it doesn't stop there. China has deeper ties beyond the supply of precursor, and it includes money laundering. A retired senior DEA leader recently stated that Chinese organized crime has taken over cartel money laundering, which is a multi-hundred-million-dollar activity. In 2021, a PRC national was convicted for money laundering of cartel drug proceeds, and in 2022, the former U.S. Southcom commander testified to Congress that the CCP is at least tacitly supporting organized laundering operations. So as the illicit use of cryptocurrency is often overstated to the detriment of adoption of cryptocurrency as a valid means of value transfer, it is important that governments and private industry and crypto leadership conduct due diligence to mitigate crypto's enabling of this dangerous trade.
And Joan, can you elaborate further on how you also see this development playing a larger role with law enforcement officials going forward?
Wyatt, I'll give you a real world example. We use data from US Customs and Border Protection, and we found on-chain flows to chemical shops' addresses that correlated with fentanyl seizures on the US-Mexican border. So what this suggests is those crypto transactions with fentanyl production match the regional patterns that were identified by DEA. So this is an example of the power of Chainalysis using on-chain data with real-world happenings. It's a true follow the money using blockchain analytics scenario that we have discussed throughout this series.
Well, Dave, it certainly seems as though this development affects both national security and law enforcement. As we wrap up, how do these crypto crime scenarios, particularly in Iran and China, exemplify the U.S. government's broader challenges in combating illicit activities within cryptocurrency space? And what lessons can be learned from these trends?
Well, we've discussed sanctions throughout the series, and despite 40 years of sanctions, Iran still exists, and China is able to leverage its strong global economy to counter many of the U.S. financial weapons, current and future. And as members of emerging monetary alliances, actively diversifying from the U.S. dollar dominance, pure financial tools to combat any malign economic activity is going to be less effective, ultimately rendering illicit crypto enforcement more difficult, more costly, and requiring new applications. So the U.S. must address these potential constraints and focus on areas that provide force multipliers, such as intelligence, influence, and generating actionable global consensus. Not easy, but it's going to be required. And it will require the U.S. to better choose battles where financial weapons are deployed to avoid further diminishing the value of the tools currently proven effective.
And Joan, your kind of closing thoughts on or recommendations on what else government officials really should be thinking of to kind of attack this more holistically as these developments continue to unfold?
I think just to our points previously, that I think it's just important to have the education and the awareness and the funding at a government level and the research and development dollars on the private sector, because some of this is very solvable. There are solutions out there. It's just such a new space that I think it really just is going to require just a lot of awareness and education.
Well, Joan Heald and Dave Hamilton, thank you so much for sharing your insights and observations about cryptocurrencies and crypto crime, and really the larger picture of how government officials really need to be looking at these developments and taking a more strategic long-term view of how to combat that. So I want to thank you both for enlightening us and joining us here on this series. So thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Wyatt.
It was a pleasure.